All right, guys, doing today. About to hop to a little reaction. The first things first, though, just make sure you like that video, man. Hit a like, it's a full screen. Scroll a bit, like it, and for screen it back up. You feel me? We got a video titled "Genius Level Arguments That Jesus Was Real." 8 minutes of pure evidence. Now, what I really do like about this is it came to my head that in some majors and in some professions, right, you have something called professional development, which is you're never done learning. So once you finish learning in school, you go out into the field, you're teaching whatever you got to teach and or you're doing whatever you got to do, but then you're constantly staying up to date with the newest research to make sure that everything you're doing is up to the common practices. Now, that's something that's notable in teaching, psychology, just because I know that those are the fields I was in. But even when it comes to stuff like physics and all that, when new discoveries and all that happens, you might hop on the wave, those new things, try to find out new things, or you may implement that into what you're already doing. Now, this is kind of similar to our faith, how not only do we have our faith, one, but we're trying to share the faith. And as new things come out, it's important that we adapt and add new things into our arguments so that we know, hey, I see that you're this kind of person. Well, this evidence just came out and that kind of hits on that. What do you think about that? So just kind of staying up to date in your faith, and not to say that like the Bible's catching any updates and there's going to be new learning, but there's always new perspective and new takes. So I think that watching sermons and hearing different perspective on new verses and how it's manifesting in today's day and age is always a good thing, or is mostly a good thing. Then there's also issues of like when you're evangelizing and having new things to say when it comes to that, because people eventually are going to say, I've heard this, I've heard that, I've heard all the same arguments and none of them work. So we got to come up with the new ones, keep seeking the new ones to find out what can work for other people. We're throwing the seeds, we're trying to reap, God brings the increase. Let's check it out.
Nabil Qureshi was a former Muslim who became a world-renowned Christian apologist after an incredible journey of faith. Through his deep study of the truth about Jesus Christ, he was overwhelmed and dedicated his life to sharing the compelling case for Jesus and Christianity with the world. Sadly, Nabil passed away from cancer in 2017, just 3 years after delivering this powerful talk. However, his legacy continues to inspire and impact countless lives for the glory of God. In this video, Nabil presents 3 undeniable pieces of evidence for the life, crucifixion, and resurrection of Jesus. Each piece of evidence builds upon the other, making the facts even more convincing. I believe what he shares about the Apostle Paul at the end is one of the most compelling reasons why we can confidently place our faith in Christ.
Real quick, there's just something when it comes to like building on evidence. So he said each piece of evidence builds on the other one. So if somebody doesn't believe the first piece of evidence, then that also leads every other piece of evidence to just come crumbling down with it, right? Because if I say, well, first you have to believe this, and then you can believe this, and this, and it says, well, I don't believe that, so I don't need to believe this, and that, So that could be a pitfall here, but we'll see what it's talking about and see how easy it is to like throw it away for a non-believer. So we figure out what ways to attack and what ways to say, well, what do you think about it from this perspective?
What are the sources regarding Christianity? And some of you might be even asking, Nabil, why should I even believe Jesus is real? Why should I ever even believe that he's a man who existed? The first thing I'm going to start off by telling you is that it is incontrovertible according to the historical principles of investigation that a man named Jesus existed in the first century. How do we know this? We have over 40 records of Jesus' life from ancient times describing this man who is essentially a carpenter in Palestine. He didn't have much of anything. He wasn't a centrally important figure at the time, yet we have 40 sources that refer to him. You know who the emperor was at Jesus' time? Someone shout it out. Tiberius. Good. Tiberius was the emperor of Rome at that time. Now, this is a man who obviously we should have a lot written about. We can expect tons and tons of records about this man, can't we? The historical records contain Tiberius' name by 10 different individuals. That's it. 10 for Tiberius, the emperor of Rome, 40 for Jesus. You can see we have excellent reason to believe that this man, Jesus of Nazareth, lived and existed in the first century. And that's why very, very few, in fact, I could probably count it on one hand, actually, I know of 2, scholars who study the historical Jesus actually claim that Jesus never existed. And one of them is Bob Price, who most other scholars say is just not even possible what he says. So we can dismiss, just due to the reasoning and due to the lack of scholastic support, that this is actually the case. So Jesus certainly exists. Okay, what can we know about him? Well, of the scholars that study him, and keep in mind, there is an entire area of historical studies.
Really quick, I do just want to point out, right, we can say that not, somebody might be able to say something along the lines of, just because 40 people wrote about it doesn't make it true. If 40 people told you the sky is purple, are you going to believe him? No, but there's definitely some evidence there that shows it. And even specifically bringing up the juxtaposition of this is the leader in one of the most powerful empires of all time, and he's only written about by 10 people. And then you got little old Jesus, carpenter boy, born in a stable, written about by 40 men. Can you make it make sense?
Called historical Jesus studies. So we have scholars who've been studying this on all sides. These aren't all Christians by any means. Actually, the most influential ones wouldn't align themselves with Orthodox Christianity. You have people like Paula Fredrickson, Marcus Borg, Bart Ehrman. You have people along these lines who would say, like John Dominic Crossan, who would say that of Jesus, we can know for a fact that he died on the cross. Now keep in mind, that's one of our 3 points that we're proving for Christianity or attempting to show to determine its reliability. Did Jesus die on the cross? The scholars who study his life, regardless of whether they're atheist, Buddhist, agnostic, Hindu, Christian, it doesn't matter. They all conclude that Jesus died on the cross. Now, if I left it there, it would be an appeal to authority, and we're trying to be academically rigorous tonight, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give you some of their reasons why they believe Jesus died on the cross, but we're going to keep it brief because scholars are unanimous on this issue. By the way, it's not just them. Even Muslim scholars will argue that Jesus did die on the cross. How many of you heard of Reza Aslan's book recently, Zealots, that came out this year? A few of you? Reza Aslan's a scholar who has studied the historical Jesus. And as a Muslim, he says, yes, Islam denies Jesus' death on the cross, and I am a Muslim, but I confirm that Jesus' death on the cross is historically certain. In fact, he builds his whole book off the fact that Jesus died on the cross. So even as a Muslim, he says Jesus died on the cross. So why? Why do they say this? Well, because first off, all the evidence that we have, all the records of Jesus' life, which talk about his death, indicate that he did die. If they say anything, it says that he did die on the cross under Pontius Pilate, which is why Paula Fredrickson says, if there's anything we can know about Jesus, anything at all, it's this, that he died on the cross under Pontius Pilate. If you go away from Christian records, you go to Jewish records like Josephus, we can also see in the first century that non-Christians are saying Jesus died on the cross. We go to Gentile scholars, they are also agreeing that Jesus died on the cross. And in fact, we also have some of them saying that these people believe he has risen from the dead. We'll get to that in just a moment. So we have excellent reason to believe Jesus died on the cross because all the records point to that. Plus, if you study the historical process of crucifixion, nobody ever in the entire history of the Roman process of crucifixion, no one ever survived a full Roman crucifixion. So we have excellent reason to believe Jesus died on the cross. Did he rise from the dead? This is an important matter. And lots of historians say we cannot investigate the resurrection because that's not a historical matter. That's a supernatural matter. And you can't study supernatural matters. Well, that's jumping the gun just a bit. If every explanation that is naturalistic falls short and falls very short of explaining what happened, then we have reason to believe that something supernatural may have happened. If there simply is no good explanation, naturalistically speaking, we can use a historical process of investigation to conclude that quite likely maybe something supernatural happened here. So what happened when Jesus died? Shortly after his death, we take a look at...
I just want to hear him say that again because I didn't really understand what he said. I know people said that it was supernatural, so you can't necessarily study that, but he said something different.
Short and falls very short of explaining what happened, then we have reason to believe that something supernatural may have happened. This naturalistic falls short and falls very short of supernatural matters. Well, that's jumping the gun just a bit. If every explanation that is naturalistic falls short and falls very short of explaining what happened, then we have reason to believe that something supernatural may have happened.
That is very true, especially because if back in the day, for example, we have written records. Wow, if I can speak, I was gonna say recordations, and I'm like, that's not a real word. If we have written records nowadays of people who lift like 2,000-pound cars, who are less than likely to lift 2,000 pounds, just to save like a dying family member or something along those lines of a feat of natural strength, like that guy who swam like 2 days out in the ocean to get back home. That one guy in Florida or whatever, Captain Dave or something, who was on the boat during a hurricane. I don't know. These weird supernatural feats of strength that can't be replicated because it's like, well, adrenaline was so high and he really wanted to save that kid, so he lifted a 2,000-pound car even though he can't even deadlift 200 pounds. And it's stuff like that. Like, explain that. You know what I'm saying? Have they? That'd be a good matter to look into. But anyway, let's keep this going.
If there simply is no good explanation, naturalistically speaking, we can use a historical process of investigation to conclude that quite likely maybe something supernatural happened here. So what happened when Jesus died? Shortly after his death, we take a look at what happened, and those historical scholars we've already referred to, in general, agree with 3 facts that are considered relatively incontrovertible. And I'm giving you what's called the minimal facts argument, if you want to look into this. It's called the minimal facts argument, primarily promoted by a man named Gary Habermas, who's written a book called The Historical Jesus. Also by his protege, Michael Licona, who's written a book called The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus. He wrote it alongside Gary Habermas. And he's also written his manifesto, a rather large book that serves well for curing insomnia. He's written that as well. Sorry, Mike. He's written that as well. And if you want to look at a very thorough investigation of the historical method on whether or not Jesus died, I suggest you take a look at this book published by Erdmans. Michael Licona is the author. The argument runs as follows. Pretty much every scholar who studies this, at least a vast majority, if not virtually all scholars, conclude 3 things happened after Jesus died. Well, number 1, the first one is that Jesus did die on the cross, which we just looked at. Number 2, that the disciples, Jesus' disciples, all believed he had risen from the dead. So the disciples truly believed that Jesus had risen from the dead, and according to most historical Jesus scholarship, Christianity wouldn't have gotten off the ground if it weren't for that fact. Fact number 3. Fact number 1 was Jesus died on the cross. Fact number 2, the disciples truly believed he had risen from the dead. Fact number 3, people who were enemies of Jesus, or not his disciples, also believed he had risen from the dead. Now, who are we talking about? We're talking specifically about 2 people, James, the brother of Jesus, and Paul, or Saul of Tarsus, as it were. James, the brother of Jesus, did not follow Jesus during his lifetime. We see in the book of Mark that Jesus' family comes up and says to people around Jesus that he is out of his mind, basically, that he's crazy, which is what leads Jesus to say, who is my mother and brother and sister? It's those who do the will of God. So Jesus' family is not on his side. It wasn't until after the resurrection, or supposedly the resurrection, when all of a sudden the disciple James becomes the brother of Jesus, James, becomes a leader of the Christian church. And also Saul of Tarsus. Who is this Saul guy? Saul was the student of Gamaliel, one of the chief leaders of the Jews in the time. This man was primed and groomed to be a leader of Jews, a leader of Pharisees. He was going to have all kinds of power in the temple. He already had all kinds of power because he was able to deliver people to prison. He was given special permission to hunt Christians down. Yet this man was willing to go to his death over and over and over again for something. For what? He claims it was because he has seen the risen Jesus. The earliest records of Jesus' resurrection say that 500 people saw him risen at the same time.
What I love about our Christian faith is that it is rooted in history and evidence. Our faith is not blind. It is built on the solid foundation of Christian apologists that God has used in order to encourage us. May videos like this strengthen your faith, deepen your love for God, and inspire you to live unashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
See, I love videos like this, but there's always one issue I have, right? Being in the major that I'm in, right? And even when I was a psych major, it's very important to cite your sources, and videos like this, they rarely often cite their sources. And even if the guy in the video did whatever, like he just linked the video, where am I gonna find the original talking points of the guy on stage? Where am I getting his sources from? Because those are the ones that matter. He's talking about 40 people recorded this, 10 people recorded this. Who are those people? What is the time periods? Where's the historical evidence? I just want to see it. Even though I already have my faith in Jesus, but I'm looking at this from the devil's advocate point of view, right? The atheist. They're gonna say, well, where's the proof? Then you got to do your Google searches, and then it looks like you're unprepared and you're not really making these claims that you're claiming. You say, well, 40 people were about Jesus. Who? When? Where? Tell me. And now you're on the back foot and you're looking like you don't know anything because you don't have sources, because they don't give you sources, even though they're probably true, but you never know until you see it. But regardless of the fact, I hope this video did something to you. And yeah, I hope you go and share the gospel.